Thank you for purchasing your new Woods Force Windsor door kit. This video is to help you with any questions you might have when it comes to assembly or detaching and reattaching the doors once it's complete. To begin with, it helps a lot if you'll take all the metal components off of the pallet, separate everything out, as well as the wood, your plywood, your beams, your stall mats, get everything put in their own separate little areas so that when you do start to assemble all these different pieces, you know where to go to get them. Last step before assembly is going to be cutting your plywood, your stall mats, and your 6x6s down to size. Your plywood, you want to cut it at 60 inches. That'll give you a good base to set the door on. Lay the plywood on the stall mat and cut it the same size. Your 6x6s need to be at a minimum of 90 inches. To begin assembly, you're going to want to square up the plywood on top of your floor mat. Set the 3 base pieces in place, make sure they're square, and measure from the center at 2 feet. Mark your leg holes and prepare to drill. Using a 1/2-inch bit, drill all the way through the wood and the rubber floor mat. Remove the plywood and push the base plate bolts up from underneath. If you need to, you can sweep in between the rubber floor mat and the plywood before you place it back on top. Square up the plywood back onto the floor mat and make sure the bolt holes line up and that the bolts freely go between both the floor mat and the wood. Bolt on the leg pieces. Once the base plate legs are bolted in place, flip the entire thing over and secure the rubber mat to the plywood with 1 1/4" screws. This will help to hold the mat in place and make sure that it doesn't rip apart when you're moving the prop around once it's entirely built. Once the mat has been secured to the plywood, we can flip it back over and begin to bolt the base plate onto the legs. Now it's time to stand the 6x6s into place. Clamp the post onto the base plates and make sure that you're flush on the outside and the bottom. Drill your pilot hole on the outside and tighten the exterior bolts. Release the clamps, then drill and bolt the rest. Once the 6x6s are secured to the base plate, it's time to put the header on. Clamp the header into place, making sure once again that the posts are flush and square with the insides of the header. Drill pilot holes on the outside and bolt. Release your clamps, drill and bolt the rest. Now preparing to attach the jam side piece, we're going to measure and mark 42 inches from the ground. This is going to mimic the normal height of a doorknob. Once you get that, hold the plate in place, drill a pilot hole and bolt. Once you have one in place, you can let go, drill, and bolt the rest. When attaching the hinge sleeve, you're going to use the exact same process as you did with the jam side piece, except for this one you want to mark 66 inches to the top. That'll be the top of your hinge sleeve. Once you get that mark, repeat the process you used for your jam side piece. On the outsides of the hinge sleeve, you're going to use the smaller lags. Before installing the doors, you want to use a little bit of lubricant on the hinges and make sure that your washers are set in place. We're going to use a 2x2 or a 2x4 to rest the door on to give you an 1.5 inch gap from the bottom. Hold the lock plate in place and use the 2x2 once you get it close enough to attach the two lock pieces. Position the hinges where they need to be. Here you can see how we used the 2x2 just to hold the lock sleeve in place while we're attaching hinges. Before attaching the hinges to the door, we want to use a washer in between the lock sleeve and the lock plate to give you a little bit of a gap. You're also going to want to use a pry bar or a Halligan something to pry against that so that you get it as tight as you can. Once you get to that point, you can start drilling your holes out to attach the hinges to the door. The easiest way to complete this process is to drill and bolt as many of the holes as you can at the top, then the bottom, and then the middle. Before drilling your holes in the lock sleeve to attach it to the door, you want to make sure it's approximately 1/4 of an inch higher than the lock plate. This will allow a little bit of give once the door settles in after use. Drill your holes and bolt your lock sleeve into place. If you have some areas that the sleeve is not allowing for enough threads to get your bolt and nut started, you can use a clamp to tighten it down to assist you. Removing the doors is an easy process, but it's best with 2 people. As one person holds the weight of the door, another person can use a Halligan or pry bar or something as a fulcrum to get the weight off of the hinges and pull it off. Like removing a door, reattaching it is best with 2 people. As one person holds the weight of the door at an angle, the other person can watch as the hinges connect and make sure that they all line up. One last tip. If you're wanting to tear the door down for traveling or just moving it around, the best way to do that is to remove the doors, then unscrew the base plate from the legs.